Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Eternal Top Decks video series. Today I want to talk about Chalice again. The last Chalice video happened a while ago, not that long ago, but there has been quite some changes, especially because the last video was pre-Omens of the Past. So some things have changed, and I also worked on the deck a bit more in general to learn some things. Also, the deck is basically kind of everywhere right now. People are talking about it a lot because they started realizing like how good it is, and also the fact that it's, in addition to that, pretty well positioned right now. And there are quite a few things that I feel the need to talk about and discuss that I think people are doing wrong with the deck, understanding or whatever, and things that I have tried that just are not worth it in my opinion. Alright, so let's dive into the deck. First off, I want to talk about the unit base. 4 Desert Marshal, 4 Temple Scribe, 4 Amber Acolyte, 4 Combrei Healer, 4 Archive Curator, 3 Lumen Defender. That's right. 0 Kothon and 0 Waystone Infuser. That's the important part here. And also, on a lesser note, 0 Disciple. So, first of all, Kothon. Pretty big topic. I voiced my opinion on this roughly a million times by now, on stream and in some other discussions, and also I think when discussing the card itself. Point being, first of all, Kothon takes up 4 slots in your deck, so you gotta have those slots. And plain and simple, right now there's no card that I would want to replace with 4 Kothon, because they all are better and or more versatile or even more powerful in my experience. Second of all, there's the problem with Kothon not being a utility card or a potential 2-for-1. Like, look at the deck. Removal is pretty bad against the deck, because everything does something before you kill it. Like, the closest to a 1-for-1 basically is Combrei Healer. But if you put the health on another unit, kind of already becomes a 2-for-1 again, and also you still gain the 3 health. Same with Lumen Defender. Also the only pseudo 1-for-1able unit. The silences and the cantrips and the extra power from the other cards are all basically worth enough that if they get removal, it's kind of like, meh, whatever, I don't care. Also, all of them are good Chalice targets, and in most cases also pretty good blockers. Like Archive Curator as a 1-4 flyer is a great blocker. Most of the common flyers in the game that you see a lot have 2 and 3 attack, so Archive Curator blocks most of the flyers you see around, other than like Great Parliament, Owls, and Impending Dooms most of the time. And you can silence those and then block them on the ground, which is another big deal. The other thing with Kothon is, yeah, basically Kothon doesn't 2-for-1 your opponent until very, very much later in the game. So by the time you play it, your opponent can just 1-for-1 trade it with a removal, even with a removal that is cheaper. So that gives the opponent the potential to make profitable trades, or like better than average trades against our blockers, and also tempo efficient trades. And that matters more than you think, because against aggressive decks, running them out of stuff while slowing them down is pretty important to lock them up afterwards. But if you allow them to kind of make solid trades with you, you might get in a spot where you're both kind of low on resources, and they might top deck out of it and beat you because they run less low impact cards like additional power and stuff, because their deck is built to function on much less power. So you might flood out and they just top deck some business and you lose. So you gotta make sure that you have enough advantage generated in resources by the time you stabilize. The other thing is that so far I didn't really feel the need for more early defenses against the type of aggressive deck that Kothon is good at against. Since keep in mind, Kothon is not even that good of a blocker. Kothon only blocks all 1-drops and some 2-drops. Like, it doesn't even block the good 2-drops. It doesn't block Instigator, Champion of Glory. It trades with Champion of Fury, sometimes even by you taking still 1 damage. And it so like the only kind of relevant constructed, oh yeah, also Awakened Student, not a good thing to block either. So the only like aggressive 2-drop it stalls is Recano Outlaw, basically, since it also doesn't block Tinker Overseer. And Groundwatch Paladin is not a card anymore. So yeah, the card kind of only helps against mostly cards that are cheaper, which is not that great. Also because these 1-drops kind of already are covered by Desert Marshal and Tempest Scribe. So the things the deck could use some help against, potentially, are the 2-drops that Kothon can't stop. So honestly, in the anti-aggro argument, I think Gruan would probably help the deck more than Kothon. Even Lynx might, just because of the ambush. And also Excavation Assistant would, in a way, because at least it costs 1 and not 2, so you have like a slow draw with a lot of depleted power. You can still play it and play like a depleted seed on turn 2. Also the Scry 1 effect is pretty helpful, so even if the guy kinda gets torched or killed in another fashion, you at least got some kind of utility and value out of it. And you can activate Chalice twice on it, and it flies, so it also blocks stuff like Tinker Overseer. So yeah, in that regard, not particularly great. The other thing is, in the later game, the activation, also not that great, honestly, since generating a random 4/4 owl and giving you Kothon flying is kind of like, whatever. Sure, it can kill your opponent eventually, and it might kill your opponent quicker, but that's not what we care about. We are a control deck. We don't care about killing our opponent faster. All we care about is if we are good enough at eventually winning the game. And we don't need to win faster. It can be a bit nice on ladder to win faster, because it makes the games go faster, you get to play more games, and it's also less exhausting. But ultimately, the deck is good enough at winning the way it is and doesn't need something to help it win. What it needs, though, is ways to help it not lose, to answer problem cards. And that's where some of the new cards come in. First, Eilyn's Choice. Great upgrade over Wasp and or Vanquish. Basically, I upgraded the Vanquishes into Choice and made room for another slot to add 4. I've been really impressed by this card, really liking it. The fact that it's in conditional instant speed, like fast spell Vanquish, matters quite a bunch against charge units, ambush units, and killer. Like, you can easily stop a Carnosaur and trade 1-for-1 with a Carnosaur that's trying to kill your blocker to open up the board for the opponent, for example. Pretty big deal. And the other thing is, it's never dead. There's barely any matchup where there's no targets for the counter, for the like negate an enemy spell effect, and at the same time also no 4+ attack unit. So the card is great. It's a bit unfortunate that the card is a bit clunky. 3 is like a bit iffy sometimes, because 3 is quite a bunch. Like at 2 the card would obviously be bonkers, but at 3 it's still pretty good. And the thing is, it stops all the cards that potentially beat you. Stash, Harsh Rule when you have a big board, Channel the Tempest, Rise on some critical card, all the annoying big units, and Great Parliament, Flame Blast, Obliterate. There's so many things. Like, all the good, like the relevant spells against the control deck in the late game basically are stopped by Eilyn's Choice, which is great. So it makes the deck so much more consistent and flexible at dealing with whatever you have to deal with, which is why it's so great and which is why I want 4 I had 3, 4, I started like 2 Vanquish and 2 Choice, and after playing a bunch with the card in various decks, I've completely fell in love with the card. If you can afford to spend 3 on the card, there's just not really a reason to not run 3 or 4, probably 4, especially the more reactive and late game your deck goes, the better the card becomes. It's just an amazing card, and a great addition that improves the deck a lot, both in overall capability of dealing with stuff that it couldn't deal with or couldn't consistently deal with before, and also do it, be generally more able to have the right answer in the right moment. One thing to note is the card is clearly worth against Mystic Ascendant and to some extent against Marshal Ironthorn if they don't attack with it, but we have 8 silences for that, so that's fine. We have that covered elsewhere basically. You just basically kind of gotta shift things around a bit. If you have this over Vanquish, you need more ways to deal with big guys that can just protect themselves by not attacking, like an Ascendant. Staying home and drawing cards is still a big threat, even without the big body attacking. So we need ways to stop that. Alright. And the other thing is Archive Curator. First of all, Disciple was nice, it's kind of card advantage, but it's just not... It's another of these Kothon type cards. It's a pretty generic card. I like it a lot better than Kothon in the sense that it at least is a hard 2-for-1, so they definitely need, in most cases, spend 2 cards, 2 effects on cleaning the entire card, because it's 2 pieces. And 1/2 is a flyer, so it helps a bit against flyers. The problem is a 2/2 flyer doesn't really stop most flyers in the game other than an unpumped Tinker Overseer, while an Archive Curator stops all the Valkyrie Enforcers and Tinker Overseers and a bunch of other stuff that you occasionally might see, aside from the big ones that I mentioned. The other thing is, with set 2, there is this card called Inquisitor Macto that is a really big pain for very slow, reactive, grindy control decks that want to kind of passively win and turn a million. And they don't really do that so well if there's a bunch of Mactos floating in the top 10 cards of our opponent. So having 8 silences, very important. I had 3 until recently, and my last change basically was to cut the last 2 Vanquish that I had for the Force Islands Choice and the Force Curator, both to have enough units, because I basically cut the Wasps, which is a bit iffy in the sense that Wasp is great against Icaria, but then again keep in mind, there's not many Icarias right now, and the major deck that runs Icaria is Armory, and Armory doesn't have a ton of silence targets, so with 8 silences you should usually be able to just have an Island's Choice and a Marshal, or at worst an Island's Choice and a Curator to just pop the Aegis, or even a healer to pop the Aegis, and then just Island's Choice the Icaria. It's a bit unfortunate because it gives them 2 triggers if it's not a Marshal to do it right away. But you also have the option to just have 2 silences and silence her after the first trigger, so she gets 0 triggers and just becomes a 5/5 ground pounder that is much easier to deal with. Or silence her and channel her before she gets a second attack. That's another option. So you just gotta plan a bit for her. Icaria basically is the most annoying out of the like Icaria Gold, big Combraxis deck, because they tax our Islands Choices and channels and generally our stuff more, so they're a bit more likely to sneak an Icaria past us without us having 2 cards to shut her down. But even that deck only has like 1 Icaria usually, so it's not that big of a deal, and we still are reasonably well prepared with 12 ways to pop the Aegis and 8 ways, or even like 12 ways to kill her between 4 Choice, 4 Harsh Rule, 4 Channel, and the 12 ways to pop the Aegis in Curator, Healer, and Marshal. Keep in mind you can healer an opposing unit to pop the Aegis if you are not aware of that. It's pretty important. And yeah, the rest of the units are what they always have been. 4 Desert Marshal, 4 Temple Scribe, 4 Acolyte, 4 Healer. They're all pretty self-explanatory, great utility units, help in the early game, help in the late game, make the deck more consistent, great defense, and 3 Lumen Defender. So the thing is, there's people that run less Lumen Defenders and some Waystone Infusers. But why? I don't see it. Like, the thing is, the difference between 5 and 6 health is pretty small, especially if you factor in the deadly. Like, even if there's a guy that has 5 or more attack, like a Titan, you can still just trade, or if you use the Chalice on it, it's a 3/7, so it's bigger than anything. And there's only basically Titan that has 5 attack on the ground, and not 4 or 6. Since all the 6 attack units, once again, run Waystone Infuser over, but that Lumen Defender at least can still trade with a Heart of the Vault because of the deadly, while Waystone Infuser can just jump. So that's not very impressive. And with a Chalice, they are equally good, except that Defender has deadly. And also, honestly, gaining 5 health is just a lot more important in that deck than roughly drawing 0.3 power per turn, because that's what Waystone Infuser does. Keep in mind, this is a 25 power deck. Acolyte and Seek power don't work, so it's a 33 power deck but a 25 actual power deck. That's a problem. Like, Waystone Infuser cares about the amount of actual power you have, and most decks can't afford to run more than 25 or 26 actual power cards because they need the non-power fixing of Seek and Acolyte and stuff. So does this deck, obviously. Also, there's that minor downside of Infuser costing 2 time, which rarely matters because the deck is set up really well to have double time on turn 2 already for Temple Scribe, but it is relevant in the sense that it can still sometimes happen that you don't have the second time, and it's nice to have more cards that work. But yeah, that's just a very minor downside. It's not the reason to not play it. But yeah, I tried Waystone Infuser a bit and the card just felt pretty irrelevant to me. While the 5 health of Lumen Defender is, together with the deadly body, is extremely stabilizing, both against reach, burn stuff, not getting burned out, and also generally like bigger boards when you're not drawing Marshal, and even stalling. Like, often they have like one big guy and a few smaller guys, and it stalls everything. Like, even if not, they can only attack with the big guy, and then you can just trade with the big guy and get rid of the big guy and try to deal with the smaller stuff with your other units. So yeah, Lumen Defender has been really great, and I just don't see Waystone Infuser being worth it over it. The deck has really good card advantage potential already with 4 Wisdom, 4 Chalice, 4 Channel. Marshal is a card advantage source. There's the Rune Hammers that I will talk about in a bit that usually provide a 2-for-1. Then there's all the 2-for-1 units and choice to stop some of the key card advantage engines and sources of your opponent. So there's really not a lot of need for a mediocre card advantage card like Waystone Infuser, I think. And once again, there's the space issue. Like, if I had more space, maybe I would run 1 or 2 because the card is not terrible. It's kind of sweet, like 2/6 blocks most stuff. It can be played for free off the top of your deck, and if not, there's always at least the 0.3 power you get per turn, so it does something. It doesn't do nothing, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't do anything that the deck desperately wants or needs or is missing. It just does something solid that kind of fits in the deck the same way as Kothon fits in the deck, even though I think Infuser sort of fits better in the deck than Kothon, at least, because being more consistent at winning, at like not running out of business in the mid to late game, I think is more important than having a random guy that blocks 1-drops, basically. And yeah, Infuser just did not seem necessary or good enough to me, and especially not better than Lumen Defender. Even when I play against Chalice, the Lumen Defender is usually the most scary drop they can have, because if you don't have an answer to it, you basically cannot profitably attack anymore, because especially for aggro decks. And since the deck has some draws where it kind of can fall behind quite a bunch early on, it's really good to have these health gain to make sure that even in long games you're just not getting cheesed out, burned out, ran over by having enough health gain. Okay, so the rest is mostly the same. I still believe very much that 4-channel is right. The card is incredibly good. It is almost always a 4-for-1, at least a 3-for-1, usually a 4-for-1 if they have any unit or relic weapon up that you can just channel away, so you kill something meaningful, so you're basically also impacting the board while also drawing 3 cards, and that usually does a lot, and it's also a win condition in the sense that eventually you can just channel them to the face for enough after having refilled your hand with Chalice and other stuff, and win that way if you need to, if you can't win on board stalls. And yeah, it just does everything that I kind of want from an 8-drop. Generates massive resource advantage and still has the potential to answer problematic things you would want to answer right now and impact the board at the same time, because not impacting the board for 8 is kind of iffy. And yeah, it's much more powerful and reliable and in a way flexible than Great Parliament, since the flexibility of generating a 4-power 4/4 flyer from Parliament is just not what this deck wants. Yeah, Parliament just doesn't synergize with the deck. And running more than 4-channel as like kind of dedicated win conditions is also something that I'm not happy with, because you already have the Chalices that kind of don't do anything early on. So you already have like 8 cards that are really bad when you're under pressure from a mid-range or an aggro deck. And you can only afford so much. So that's why there is no Parliament. I also never felt that I need or miss Parliament. I wouldn't even run Parliament in my sideboard probably. So yeah, no Parliament. And yeah, I mean, Wisdom doesn't need any explanation, nor does Marshal or Chalice. So the last card that we need to talk about is Auric Rune Hammer. There wasn't in my last video, but there was already in our decklist for the Invitational. That was basically the innovation, the sort of tech that I came up with for our Chalice list for the Invitational, when we were thinking about like how to round out the deck and among others make it better against Rakano, because Rakano can sometimes be a problem. And Runehammer is great. Like we all know, relic weapons are awesome against Rakano, and another thing that Runehammer is really awesome against is Aegis units, like Silverwing Familiar, or sometimes Groundwatch Paladin if they still run it, which is not very likely these days. So Runehammer is really great against Rakano in general. It's also pretty good against aggro in general, especially with all the defensive blockers that the deck has up. And it has become even better with the introduction of Skycrack because of Vadius and Snowcrush Daddy. So there's 8 annoying Aegis units, and the best way for them to beat you basically is make you fall behind on board, have a medium-sized board with a mix of Aegis and non-Aegis units, so that you can neither catch up with units nor reset with Marshal, because then you just die to the Aegis guys that are surviving and you're struggling to get the Aegises off to Marshal before you die, which usually doesn't go so well, especially if you're not running Archive Curators either, because then you have like the Marshals, because you can't really afford to Combrei healer Aegises against aggro. You need the 2/5. So yeah, Runehammer is great. It's also really great against Armory. Armory is already a favorable matchup, especially with 4-channel, but the Runehammer really cements it. It's really great against the units, especially Throne Warden, and a good way to stop their weapons from mauling our smaller guys and like killing multiple of our units, or even sometimes just pressuring their life total. And we can protect it really well with our units, so they cannot kill it easily with their relic weapons. It also happens to be a nice answer against Seraph and some other stuff. Like there's also Basalo now that Runehammer kills, and even Hero of the People with Basalo and Silverwing Familiar. There's just a whole bunch of great targets for Runehammer. The card has just been amazing. Like in the Invitational we had the 3rd in the sideboard, but yeah, with all the good new Aegis units, I added a 3rd to the main deck because the card is just really, really good and deals with basically the last annoying thing for the deck that the deck was not that good at dealing with. Good aggressive Aegis units, basically. And occasionally relic weapons. So yeah, this is the deck list. Let's talk about the power base real quick. 25 power plus 4 Acolyte and 4 Seek, 33 power between the card draw and everything. That's a fine number. The 8 fixes are also very important for the power base because the deck effectively wants time, justice for Primal at some point, and the power base has been worked extensively with Zarius in the past when we built the power base to get all the numbers right. So you can see we have 14, 17, 21 time sources for turn 2 Temple Scribe. That's pretty close to what you have in decks like Shimmerpack. Like Shimmerpack has 20 for turn 2 and 28 for like 24 for turn 3, usually 23 to 24 for turn 3, and with the Acolyte then 28 for turn 4 plus, which is obviously already way excessive. Like you basically, I think, need like 20 sources to have like 90%, roughly 90% chance for double time on turn 3 or something, and we have like 21 plus the Acolytes to help out. So between the Acolytes, the deck can probably like 70 to 80% Temple Scribe on 2, and is pretty good at Temple Scribing on turn 3 or 4. Reliably, basically. Sometimes you can't even Temple Scribe on 2 because you have double time, but one of your power enters depleted, so that's fine. In terms of blue, we have 9, 13, 17, 21 blue for channel, which is a reasonable amount. Like channel, like usually by the, like we calculated the percentages for blue on turn 8 and also for 8 power on turn 8, and make sure that the percentage of 4 blue on turn 8 is not much higher than the percentage to even have 8 power on turn 8, because you only need a similar percentage for having 4 blue then by turn 8 as you have to have 8 power by turn 8, because you just want to have 4 blue every time you have 8, because you don't need 4 blue in 7 power, you need 4 blue in 8 power. So if the percentages for that are roughly the same, then you have a good setup, and that's what we calculated for. As well as trying to fit as much blue in as we could without making the power base too unstable and or slow. And for justice we have 2, 4, 11, 15, 19, which is a pretty good number for double justice for harsh roll on 5. 19 is almost enough, I think, for double green on 3. So it's pretty solid, since this is not on 3 anyway. So the 19 justice also are pretty sufficient for a fairly reliable double justice on 4 for Rune Hammer. So the numbers all work out pretty well. Distribution, 10 seeds, 6 banners. Deck has quite a bunch of units, so 6 banners is a good thing for like your mid and late game drops, when you, especially for like top decking power, and seeds are good for early. We have 9 actual sigils for Seek to make seeds enter readied from turn 2 or 3 onward, and Acolyte can still help with like mid game seeds being ready rather than exhausted. It is possible that 10 seeds, 6 banners is suboptimal, and it should be 8 banners, 8 seeds, for example. That's something that I'm gonna experiment a bit with and keep an eye on. Like, it is possible that these 2 seed of order should be 2 Hooru banner. And I think I'm actually gonna try that and test that a bit. Because Hooru is the best color for banners, basically, since you want the time seeds early on for Temple Scribe and stuff. And you need the extra green and the extra blue late for Channel, Harsh Roll and Runehammer, Chalice. So and also for later game Wisdom, because you're often not gonna play it on 3. So that's where it's more important that your top decked 5th power for Harsh Roll is ready every time, even if you don't have power in your hand. So banners make the most sense here. So, but the reason is if we want more than 8 seeds, we needed to run Hooru seeds as well, because we already maxed out on the non-Hooru seeds, the whatever Hooru seeds, even though Hooru is the best color for banners, because we didn't want or have much room for many Hooru duels to begin with, because we need a lot of time duels because of Temple Scribe. It is also debatable whether this should be another Justice Sigil, for example, to have like 20 time and 24 with Acolyte and have 20 Justice in total. So that's something that I can also see, just cutting one here and adding one Justice to make Justice a bit smoother. Like if you feel like you're having too often having no second Justice for Rune Hammer or Harsh Roll when you need it, you could make that swap. But if there's enough Justice, it's better to have more time to increase the chance of turn 2 Scribe, because that's the kind of iffiest color requirement in the deck in a way. And by the way, probably the only card that I could see straight up being replaced by Kothon, but even that is hard, because the 1 health and being a free card and digging deeper in your deck is really, really good in the deck, but it's clearly a worse early board presence than Kothon. But replacing that with Kothon would do two things. It would make the deck more robust early game, and also take a lot of pressure off the power base, because then you can suddenly go much heavier Hooru, play more non-dual land, just like play more sigils, because then you don't need this much time, because suddenly you have no double time in the deck, and only have like 1 time 2 drop that you often don't play on 2, and a times 3 drop that you don't always need to play on 3, so it's mostly like turn 3 healer that you wanna very reliably enable. And yeah, that would definitely make the power base smoother and more consistent, but that comes at the cost of losing Temple Scribe, which is a really good card. But that's something that I could see trying if you really want Kothon. Try Kothon over Scribe. Adjust the power base, make the power base smoother, and see if the better power base and more consistent power development make up for the loss of Temple Scribe. Yeah, that's it for the deck list. That was quite a long deck tech, but yeah, I felt like there are some very important things to discuss in depth for people to better understand why Kothon is not a good choice for the deck and doesn't really fit the deck very well, and why Lumen Defender is also a better choice than Waystone Infuser, and Waystone Infuser is kind of overhyped as well. And also introducing the very important technology of Runehammer and Eilyn's Choice, because so far I see people running like 2 Eilyn's Choice, which is kind of criminally wrong, because the card is so amazing and throws up so many things for the deck the same way that the extra silences do, especially Acto. Alright, that's it for the deck tech. As usual, I'm gonna hop into some games, show it in action. So stay tuned for the first half of the games coming up. And one note in terms of supporting the content. First of all, there's a donation link in the description below if you want to financially support the channel and the content. But there's other things you can do, like please turn off your ad block. I put ads at the beginning and the end of each video, so that people that want to more actively support me can also let the ad at the end of the video run after they finish the video without any interference, because I don't want to put ads in the middle of any videos. So I just put one at the beginning and one at the end for the people that actively want to support me they can also check out those ads. And yeah, also social media links in the description or over here, as well as my Twitch for my streams. So check that out too. And see you in a moment with the games. Thanks for watching.